I think the quantity surveyors have a really important part to play here in the traditional sense, because if the QSs are really vetting the design material coming out, and I don't mean in terms of buildability, or that's not their role, but in terms of the information, because if they're using that information to prepare or produce their cost plans and bills of quantities, they'll have already qualified whether the information is usable and functional for them to quantify, because the contractor uses it in the same way effectively. And what we've noticed is when we're in that workflow with them, the contractor has a much better experience when they receive the design information, the models, the drawings, the spec, because it's been qualified in a way that's not design related. It's nothing to do with design, it's got to do with information. And can we understand it? And I think that's a big role for the QSs. And it's one of the reasons maybe they haven't started to get into that, because they're looking then at, well, we need to know Revit, and we need to know, you don't need to know any of that stuff. Yeah. You free viewers, it's information. You need to know process, understand the process. Whatever tool you have, whether it's a Costex for calculation that you use or whatever, that'll feed into your process, but understand the process, not necessarily.
It's just having the bravery to step outside your comfort zone. You know, if you're used to working in 2D PDFs and Bluebeam and Excel sheets,
printing and ruler, you know.
Yep. We roller wheels for their line measure. I've did it all. You know what I mean? It's just it's having the strength of yourself to know that there's better ways to do it, and not being afraid to maybe admit that you're behind. You know, maybe some of the older generations. I know I work with some older ladies and gentlemen, and you have to treat them with a bit more respect and a bit more kid gloves. You're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're not trying to reduce their experience or their knowledge. You know, you kind of say to them, look, your gold dust to me, you know, your experience is fantastic, but here's how you could be better. You know, here's how, you know, what would you, I always go to them and say, what do you struggle with? You know, what do you find yourself wasting time on? You could be doing something better. And they'll say to me, oh, you know, taking off. And I say, well, have you tried this? Have you looked at this? And it's much more positive than it is negative, you know. Yeah. Definitely is.
It's a nice segue into our final part, and from an industry wide perspective, as opposed to services design for the moment. What do you think we need to do better within the industry, and why? I mean, perhaps we've touched on some of the subjects, but
for me, it's collaboration. Do you know what I mean? I'm very tired of the poker game that sometimes it can reduce into. And I understand that there's so many facets to that. You know, there's money, there's politics, there's all that.
It's culture.
It's culture. It's everything. It's very hard to put your finger on any pulse at all. But for me, the collaboration part, as I have witnessed collaboration really taking hold over this last 15 years, you see the actual building in the centre getting better. You know, I've seen the models getting better over the years. I've seen the understanding of the models getting better. I've seen all the firms involved actually getting better, whereas we worked with architects maybe 10 years ago and it was a very rough building. And whereas now we're getting that innate sense of quality in the models and accuracy, which is for us as a DFMA, design for manufacturing assembly, that is inherently important to us. People floating in ceilings at rough heights and leaving big gaps in the bulkhead and all. Especially when you start to use technologies that we've implemented, like AI or AR and XR, you start to see the bad modeling. You start to see the corners that are being cut. So it's driving a quality for us all, you know, from architectural to structural to civils to the MEP guys. We all now can see each other's designs a lot more than we used to. And
now you're onto something.
Your
the
sort
transparency aspect.
Transparency, yes, you know, and we could be very guarded in our models, and you know, there's so much IP in our models, but we give our models out to anyone that asks for them. You know, we're driving change in the industry, and I'm driving change in all parts of it. You know, and I suppose it's lead by example for me.
Absolutely.
I'm always looking for someone to follow, and I've had the fortunate to work for some brilliant engineers over the years where I've sucked all the knowledge from them, and I just intended to be the exact same now for the rest of the industry. It's very humbling for anyone to listen to me or follow what I do, so I don't take that lightly. You know, I take that as a great responsibility, and I do share everything, all my workflows, my Dynamo scripts. It's an open book for me. I don't. I've seen instances where people have taken my work and have rebadged it and have used it as their own, which I don't like, because I would teach any man or woman in this world how to do Revit, how to do what I do freely. I spend quite a lot of time doing podcasts. People from all over the world contact me at nights and on my own hours. You know, I'm happy to give back, but I don't really like anyone just stealing your work. You know, there's no pride in that whatsoever. No. You'd rather teach a man to fish.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly. I mean? Yeah, I think the collaboration piece is super important. There's an ingrained kind of culture in the construction industry, even though it needs to be super collaborative. It's not. We're silo based. We're if you go back to even in education universities, you're silo based there. That's where it all starts and stems from in reality, in my mind. And one of our biggest struggles is now we're transitioning from a moment where actually I could hold all of my information. You couldn't see anything. You could see the end result of the workflow, the process, but you couldn't see how I got there. So you couldn't see my rough work. You couldn't see all the kind of homework in order to get there. But now everything is shown, warts and all, and that's made people very uncomfortable. I think in a previous podcast, we would say, like in Cosmos, we would show our cost plans or cost estimates to all the stakeholder groups. It's their information, not ours. All we did was rebadge it up as a cost plan. So we took MEP design, quantification, system-based, priced it up. Now we want to know, well, you're the engineer, you designed it. Have we covered everything? Have we missed anything out? You know your specification, you wrote it. Yes, we read it to understand it, but at the end of the day, it's yours. So can you help us and we'll help you? And it has powerful effects, I think, with people.
It does, yeah. The more you bring people in, and the more you sort of put your arm around them rather than pushing them away, you find that you garner great working relationships with people, and we find that with our clients as well. We come to the site with a can-do attitude. We will solve problems. We're not just going to sit back and say that sounds like an architect's problem or that sounds like a structural engineer's. No, that's not our ethos. It's a design team. The word is team. We're all a team, and we'll come up with ideas certainly, and we'll float them across the table. But we're not ever sit back on our laurels and say, "Oh, we would know how to fix that," but you may put your hand in your pocket.